Hi, my name is Ruqsana Begum. I'm currently a professional boxer, a former world Muay Thai champion, and the author of Born Fighter, which is now out on Amazon and Waterstones.
Tell us a little bit more about your passion and love for fighting. Where did that start?
I grew up watching Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali from a very young age. I remember my uncle used to, he used to love watching Bruce Lee, and I was absolutely fascinated with the skill, the sheer strength, and the wisdom behind the martial art. And I think I was drawn to that. And as soon as I turned 18, I noticed there was a poster saying kickboxing class after school. So I went along to it and I absolutely fell in love with it. It was just so much discipline and focus that you required, allowed you to be present in the moment. And it just allowed, I was absolutely, in love with the fact that I found a passion in life.
Tell me a little bit more about growing up and your family and your background and what it was like, growing up in London, coming from a Muslim family.
I had a really lovely, close-knit family. Obviously, we're talking about 15, 20 years ago, even longer than that, actually, because I'm 36 now. So as a child, we're talking about the 90s, late 80s, 90s. And, it was so nice, living with my grandparents, having all my siblings and my parents all under the same roof. We used to play games, we used to go out and play in the park. However, I noticed as soon as I turned like 8 or 9, my mother wouldn't let me go out to play in the park with my other siblings because she wanted me to become more of a lady and support her in the house with the household chores. This was ingrained into me, the family values and the tradition. I have so much respect for my parents for bringing me up with such great values, and it's made me who I am today.
Did you feel as though there was quite a lot of restrictions on being a girl when you were growing up about what it was that you could do and what you could get involved in? I mean, were you able to get involved in sports?
Definitely. I mean, I already knew certain things were out the question to even ask, such as participating in sport after school or joining a martial arts class. I already knew this was something my parents wouldn't approve of, and for many reasons. One, due to obviously culture and tradition, maybe religion as well. And on top of that, economic, financial reason. I was one of five and we're all kind of, living in the same household. So I knew it was a big ask for me to pursue something like that through my parents. They had a lot of responsibility. So, yeah, it was quite difficult.
So what happened at 18? So was that when you started going to college? That's when you started taking up kickboxing.
Mhm.
Share a little bit more about what happened after that.
So, yes, I discovered kickboxing whilst I was at college, and it was the first and the last session that the school had introduced. And I was absolutely heartbroken to learn that it was the last session. And I stood in front of the instructor, and he felt so bad. He gave me his card and said, "Come to my gym." And I thought, well, this I can do after school. My parents will think I'm in the library or something. I don't need to really disclose to my parents why, I've taken half an hour longer to get home. Whereas physically attending a gym and what that means financially and making the time is a different challenge for me. And so I was just heartbroken. But at the same time, I took a summer job and started university, and I realized the restrictions and the expectations my parents had of me was slowly starting to change. My lectures were not only during the day, they were sometimes in the evenings, and I had to study a lot over the weekends. So, and I was a very dedicated student. I spent most of my time studying, and my only outlet was the sport. So I decided to then religiously go every Sunday to the gym just for an hour and then rush back home so I can help my mom with anything that she needed help with. She kind of knew that I was going to the gym, but didn't know I was doing martial arts. She thought I was just taking part in, women's only aerobics class or something at the time.
What were you studying at university?
I studied architecture.
Oh, wow. Is that like 6 years or something, or 8 years? Is it a really long time?
It is. I did the 4-year degree and then I worked for 2 years. And then I just ended up pursuing the sport.
Let's go back to the sport then. So you talked about, training at the gym. Culturally and traditionally, is it okay for you to train in a mixed gym? Were you training with other women? Were there other women doing the kickboxing as well?
I mean, at that time, it wasn't acceptable even for Western women to be in an environment where it's a quite a brutal, male-dominated environment. So as you walk in, all you see is a different breed of men, just alpha, ego-driven men, all kind of, big and strong. And then there's little me walking into a gym like that. And I think there was maybe approximately 4 or 5 women in the whole gym that were a member, and they were all very dedicated, strong alpha women too. So it wasn't a friendly place like it is today, how the industry in fitness has completely changed, and the martial arts, a lot of people take it to get fit, people want to learn a new skill, whereas back then it was a hardcore gym. So it was very unusual for someone of my background to be Muslim, but being a minority, being ethnic, being Asian and Bangladeshi in that matter, walking in, all the odds were against me in so many levels. It's just something that I connected so well with, and I just absolutely loved it. I love the fact that it taught me life skills. It allowed me to stay calm and composed. It gave me an outlet in life.
I mean, just going back to what you said, and just describing it, I can imagine it, and I'm walking into this very alpha, sweaty, testosterone.
I'm telling you, yeah, exactly that.
Like, I know that it can be intimidating, even for me to go into, say, like the weights area of the gym. Sometimes you're like, oh,
Yes.
should I be here? How did you handle that mentally? Because it wasn't just the fact that you're a woman and a small woman. And were you wearing the hijab at this point as well?
Actually, I was initially, because obviously I grew up with very traditional and strict Islamic values. So, I was scared to even arrive 5 minutes home late. I would panic on the train, thinking my mom's going to give me the third degree now. She's going to interrogate me why I've been 5 minutes late. So I was always so afraid of how my family would react and what that would mean. And I guess the beauty of this, me pursuing a sport and I hadn't told anyone, was the fact that I didn't have any projections. I didn't have any expectation. I just walked in. I was free spirit. And I think that was the beauty of it, that I didn't assign any meaning to it. I went for it like a child. You see something and it doesn't matter how many times you fall down, you just get on with it because you enjoy it so much. And I found this passion and I absolutely loved it. And I realized it doesn't matter how good you are, you still have to work hard. You still have to be dedicated and, sacrifice a lot and make choices that will, adhere to your values and your beliefs that you've grown up with.
When did you have to have that conversation with your parents to say, look, this is what I'm doing. This is my passion. I love fighting. I'm practicing Muay Thai at the gym. How did that conversation go?
It's interesting because you use the word fighting, and for me, it wasn't the word fighting that I assigned to my sport. I see it as a discipline. I see it as an art. I see it as a place where I call home. I see a place where I kind of challenge myself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I grow in that environment. And that's how I see it. I see it as a chess game. Every time I walk into the gym, I'm thinking, okay, today I want to improve myself. Today I want to be better than I was yesterday. And it's whether it's technically, if it's something that I have to control, if it's, it's just measurements, it's millimeters. And that's how I see it. And I guess the first time I had to tell my parents and reveal it to them was once I had finished university. I had an arranged marriage. And in that time, I went through depression and panic attacks and completely lost my identity. And I was completely bedbound. And the only thing that I felt familiar with and gave me any sense of identity or happiness was the sport. And at that moment, I made a decision that I wanted to go off the antidepressants, and I took myself to the gym to heal myself. And by this time, I plucked up the courage to reveal to my parents that, look, I'm not living a double life anymore. I want your blessing to do this, because this is the only thing that's going to save me at this moment. And I think they fully understood that. They realized it's a choice between having their daughter back or completely losing me, because I was in a really bad state. I was just really suppressed in that marriage, bullied, and it kind of, and I held it together for so long that eventually it just expressed that suppression through physical symptoms, which was panic attacks, and then later on depression. And I became really numb. So I think the sport saved my life. So at that moment, my parents, they couldn't care. They didn't care about their values and their tradition, which I'm really grateful for, because that was a big decision for my parents. And to be so open-minded about what had gone through, they could have been really, said, no, you're still, within our household, you're sticking by our rules. But they didn't. They actually, they had a very modern outlook at that point, and I'm really grateful for them for moving on with the times and accepting me and accepting my choice and allowing me to pursue a sport and a martial art, of course.
Is depression and having panic attacks, is that something that is sort of mental health, I suppose? Is that something that is discussed in Muslim households, or is it very taboo?
Not at all. I mean, I didn't even know I was going through all of this until my GP. I remember she was Indian, and I was so grateful. She grabbed my hand one day and she said, "Can you pick yourself back up? And you remind me of my daughter." And I think she must have had a word with my parents without me being present. And it really just went a long way to have someone of the medical profession explain to them what I'm going through, because I don't think they knew and they understood, because it's something that I was trying to express to them whilst I was going through, the whole ordeal. And no one really listened to me. So I just kept internalized it and thought, I need to be stronger and I can do this. It's the fighter in me that was, okay, I can do this. Every day was a new challenge. However, eventually it took a toll on me and my body just rejected it, my thoughts. Then the day I accepted that this was going to be my life and I need to embrace it and be a better wife, better daughter-in-law, better, daughter, better person, because I kept thinking it's not enough. Everything I was doing was not enough. So I kept striving harder and harder. And I just became so exhausted mentally, physically, that it all released into panic attacks. And I think it was something that my parents were not familiar with. But they were grateful. I think the language barrier, having an Indian doctor, that made it slightly easier, because I think they could communicate a little bit better.
Are you still suffering with chronic fatigue? Sorry, ME.
Yeah, it is one of the syndromes, basically. It is ME, but I've always known as chronic fatigue. At first I was in denial. I thought, no, I'm not lazy. I'm someone who, trains. I've had 6-7 jobs at one point whilst I was at university. But later on, once I took the advice of my coach and my doctors, it did pay dividends. And I noticed the more I stayed away from stress, the better I was in terms of sharpening my skill rather than overtraining in terms of fitness. It paid off. So now I'm very careful. I have short, sharp sessions and worked maybe 40-50% of my energy rather than 70, because the moment I go into like 60 and above, my body fatigues and then I'm in bed for like 2 weeks. So I've just learned to control it and manage it really well at the moment. And diet is another thing that really plays a big part. So you just have to eat really clean, lots of vegetables, nothing not fried. Anything that's going to spike your blood sugar levels is not good, because then you go for the lows, and that low is a lot lower than most people with someone with ME. So yeah, it's just being really sensible. Sleep is a key factor, making sure I've got my sleep right. I even have to nap during the day sometimes in order to, if I've had a good session, I nap during the day so I can restore my energy levels again.
Oh, I'm down for the afternoon nap. It's one of my favourite things to do. I think more people should do it if they can. So in 2008, you started to fight professionally. I'd love to hear more about that transition of moving into professional fighting, or following your discipline and following your art.
Definitely. I obviously, once I was at the gym environment, I realized that I was holding my own with most of the girls that were professional at the time. So by 2008, the gym became much more of it became a bigger space, and there were a lot more females during that time competing and training and staying fit and healthy. So there were a lot more competitors, you can say. So yeah, when I noticed that I was holding my own with maybe a fraction of the training that I was receiving, I realized I could do so much more. And I remember having a number of conversations and almost strong, opinionated discussions with him, trying to convince him to let me fight. And I said to him, look, if I can do this with just training with you twice a week, imagine what I could do if I was to get the same support that other female athletes were getting, and the same attention and resources. And then he said, okay, I'm going to give you a shot. And then we went for the British title, and then I won. He just put me in the deep end completely. And he said, look, we can warm you up and we can get you 10 fights prior to leading up to that, or you can become a star overnight and you take this fight and see how you get on. I said, look, I can take this fight. And I was aware that I had ME as well, so I didn't want to deplete my energy systems by taking 10 warm-up fights to get there. I thought it's all or nothing for me. I'm going to learn and strategize really well. When I'm in the ring, I'm going to give it my all. And it doesn't matter if I crash afterwards, because I've got time to recover. But prior to the fight, it's all strategic mental programming for me and conditioning. So that's what I did. And, it paid off. It really did.
So your nickname is the Warrior Princess. You are a super flyweight. You stand at 5'3", which is 1.6 meters. Tell us what it was like getting into the ring for the first time. Like, mentally, what is going on? What's fueling your mind in terms of what's the strategy?
Every experience, every fight was different. And the first couple of fights, I didn't think about it too much. I just went in there and just got on with it. And then the more pressure that started to build up in terms of the higher level fights, the more nervous I started getting. And then it was something that I had to really learn to master my own fear and emotions, because I started getting almost petrified to get into the ring. But I knew I had the skill. I knew I could do this. But sitting in the changing room amongst all these other nervous people, I didn't enjoy that. It's that anticipation and the build-up almost is the worst part for me. Being in the ring is fine because I'm designed for that. I can control my emotions there. It's fight or flight. I'm ready to fight at that moment. But prior to that, it's allowing myself to be composed and ready for the battle, but not let it consume me, not let that fear overtake me and burn me out. So that took some time to really kind of learn to control your own emotions and your thoughts and the fears that you can face from yourself, from experience, from certain fights. You go to sleep certain nights and you're punching in your sleep and your reflexes are moving. It's just because you're in this bubble for so long. You're in camp and all you think about is one goal, is working towards that fight. So yeah, it's a really intense process.
So your book is called Born Fighter. Do you think that fighting is just something that's come really naturally to you, or is it something that maybe that you've had to work on in order to get the punching and the combinations and the flow right? or was it more natural than that?
That's really interesting you asked me that, because I had this conversation with a friend yesterday, and they said they love the quote in my book where it refers to, I think it was Bill on my first bout, and he wasn't present. And he said to me, "I don't worry about you, because you have instincts. You can't teach, that's it. You can't teach someone to fight. And with you, I don't worry about you, because you know how to fight." And I think it's a metaphor for life in general, because when you're in tune with yourself and you trust your own instincts and intuition, you will find the flow naturally. And that's something very hard to be able to do. I mean, majority of my fights, I've been able to tap into that. But sometimes your own fears, your doubts take over. And when you do that, you're losing moments. You're losing crucial moments where you should be thinking about what my next strike is, rather than, oh, sugar, did I just get hit? Or you've paused for a second, or you're trying to evaluate the fight. And you shouldn't do that, because that's where you're losing vital momentum in a fight or anything in life, really. That's how I see it. I feel like when you're in flow, you're going to be guided by your intuition.
Would your parents come and watch you fight?
In the past, they haven't, because I was always afraid to reveal it to them. And once I got selected for Team GB, I was traveling quite a bit with the competition, so they were not able to, even if they wanted, they couldn't. But when I fought in England, the fights were too big, so I didn't want them suddenly turning up, because I didn't know how they would feel about seeing their daughter being in the ring, or maybe getting injured or being hurt. So I made that decision to just carry on as how things were for me. However, they have seen me fight on TV. They were really lovely. When I made my first debut in boxing, I told my parents, but I didn't give them all the details. And then they actually called my sister up to find out what time my fight was going to be on, and they watched it. And I think they were really proud. They called me up and they said, your opponent was really tough. And I was so surprised not to get, a telling off. Rather, my father said he was really proud. And then he did have to add, he said to me, "Why didn't you cover your arms?" So I was like, okay, Dad.
Would you fight in a hijab?
I think religion for me and my faith is very, very important. But I think right now I'm not there in terms of wearing the hijab. I do pray. I don't drink. I don't eat pork. There's so many things that I stick to in terms of my values and my principles. But in terms of hijab, I feel that I'm someone who just dress modestly. And for me, it's more about intention. Is the intention that you put behind an action, then rather than I'm going to be at the mosque 5 times a day and wear a hijab. To me, that's not what it is. My understanding about my religion and faith is being close to God, being a good person. What does that mean? And that means, to me, that everyone's good. Everyone has goodness. We just do things, that are occasionally not acceptable in society. And then we need to learn from that, evolve and mature, and move forward. And it's just having that understanding where try to understand others rather than to be understood. And I think that's a big part of, man conquering himself and the journey of life.
I was just wondering more if it's legal or illegal to wear it.
I think initially it wasn't, given the health and safety regulations in terms of wearing the hijab and competing. But I think now that more and more people are pushing forward the fact that people should be able to train in lens or wear a hijab. But I think even now, I'm not 100% sure, but even the GB squad have to wear shorts, whether it's your faith. They might be allowed to wear leggings underneath, but certainly I've been in competitions where, for example, in Russia, they made me take my leggings off and said they'll disqualify me if I don't wear just shorts on its own. And I had traveled all that way, spent all that money, And then my coach was so embarrassing. They, because I was already wrapped up, they had to pull my leggings off, put my shorts back on, and then push me in the ring in the less than 20 seconds. And I thought that kind of mental stress and, it wasn't healthy and it wasn't right. But my coach looked at me and said, look, tomorrow, don't worry, once, win this fight, tomorrow is going to be a different story, because Iran is fighting and Morocco is fighting, which means they will change the regulations, which they did, of course. But on my instance, I had to go and they didn't change the regulation at the time. But overnight, they had to have an emergency meeting saying they can't send all these countries home due to this, this regulation that they have in place.
Because I was also reading that you've actually, is it that you've designed a sports hijab so that it is a breathable version, so it's not the traditional scarf worn.
Yes,
which I think is absolutely amazing, and I'd love to hear more about that and
Thank you.
how it's developed, because it's just going to hopefully encourage more women to get into doing these games. And also, I'm so sorry about that experience in Russia as well. Like, things like that sort of don't cross your mind, but it's actually, it's just not fair, is it, to have that happen?
I was so used to it. It happened in nearly every competition that I went to, and it's just something that if you're not comfortable with, I wasn't used to showing my legs, so for me it was uncomfortable for me to be just fighting in shorts. And obviously religious wise, because I felt like already I'm compromising doing a sport that my background doesn't really allow. On top of that, they're asking me to give up my dress code and my values. So it's really hard in that sense. However, yes, absolutely. I was so inspired when I went to these world championships and I used to see so many Muslim countries competing. And what was so remarkable to me was that we were Great Britain and we had like 5 girls in our squad. And then you had countries like Morocco and Turkey and Iran who had full squads, and they would practice, like they had a uniform that was quite modestly designed, and they would wear a hijab. Not all females, but some of them were a little bit more traditional and they would wear a hijab. So I was inspired by all of this, and I thought that was an eye-opener for me. And I thought, well, we need something like this in England. We need a sports hijab that's breathable, that's functional, that every girl who's taking part in PE in school needs one. The mother who just wants to go out for a run, she can wear one, and not worry about compromising their faith. So it was really important for me to design something like that, and just where faith meets fitness. Of course, now it's widely available through different brands. But I was one of the first people to design it in England.
Good for you. It's like, yes, like that's such an amazing amazing thing to do for other women. Tell me about your world championship. So in 2016 you became the world kickboxing champion. Well done.
Thank you.
If you could just share more about that journey of getting to that point. I mean, incredible.
That was a huge, I forget how hard I had to work. It was a 10-year process leading up to that moment. And then I remember the week before, I had an episode of ME. I think I may have just trained a little bit too hard. It's fine tuning with ME. It's a little bit like love and hate. There's a fine line between it. And it's just being really careful and knowing where that moment is. And I was bedbound for the whole week, and I was afraid I won't be able to fight. And my coach said to me, okay, what we will do is that we will turn up and let the medics pull you out, because otherwise, the promoter's going to be upset. You've sold tickets. You're the headliner of the show. And, we've been here before, and my previous world title, I felt like I won, but they gave it to my opponent. So it's been a long journey, long struggle with my coach undergoing chemo as well, and then me suffering from ME. And we just looked at each other and said, okay, let's just get there. This is the last hurdle. And I passed the medical, because what they did was they gave me enough time to recover, and did my medical ringside. And I started feeling a bit better because I think the energy in the room and the atmosphere made me feel a little bit more alive. But I couldn't last a warm up in the changing room. And I said to my coach, okay, 2 minutes. If you see me in danger, just throw in the towel at any point. So we already had a strategy in place. I trusted him. I knew if I was struggling, he would throw in the towel. It's the job done. It's okay. We've done our best. As long as I did my best, I could live with that. So my aim was to jump in the ring and just knock her out. So that first round, I went all out, trying to absolutely, destroy her. But this woman came back stronger and stronger. And I guess every round was just dig deeper. And it was just going into a different zone, really. There was moments I think on the fourth round, I had nothing left in my tank. I couldn't even move. I could see her coming towards me and my feet would not move because I was so fatigued. But it was just it's the thought. I thought, no, I mean, this is what a world title is going to feel like. And I had done enough to win the fight. So, yeah, it was just one of those incredible moments in my life, because I felt that by me doing this is going to inspire so many people from so many walks of life. And, even till today, I look at how my niece looks at me and she's so proud. And that's what it's about. It's about inspiring the next generation. And it's moments like that define you for the rest of your life.
And one of the things I'd love to delve into a little bit more is almost that mental resilience, that mental toughness that you've got, because, throughout your life, you've shared with us more about the challenges that you faced and overcome, from panic attacks to dealing with depression to having chronic fatigue. When you've got to push yourself for the next round, the next 2 minutes, where does your mind go? Or what are the tips? What are the tricks? What is in your toolbox to help get you where you need to get to?
I guess I tend to think of things as temporary. It's a temporary pain, it's a temporary situation. And it's all about how you look at yourself. Is it something that you're going to be proud of coming out the situation? Because this situation is going to end very soon. And if you don't give it your all, it's going to haunt you. And I guess that's something I've learned through experience, being in the ring, being in the changing room, because you have such a long build up, so much pressure rising. But it's whether you can display that and rise to the challenge when it actually counts. So it's the mental tuning and having faith. I think for me, I relied on something greater than myself, which was God. When I was in that ring, and every time I struggled, I seeked for God to help me through it. And it's, something that I read Muhammad Ali used to do, that he used to visualize God fighting through him. And it was so amazing, because I used to do the same thing without knowing that he felt the same way. And you just get an abundance of energy all of a sudden. And again, it's the thought process. It's what you're allowing to go into your mind, because the mind is then feeding the body.
You've transitioned from kickboxing into professional boxing, which you did in January 2018. Tell us more about that decision. Why did you decide to make that transition?
A number of reasons. First of all, I really wanted to take up boxing, especially after watching Nicola Adams win the Olympic gold. She was such an inspiration. And I thought, yes, I want to do this. However, I felt like I was cheating on Thai boxing with boxing. So I continued with my journey, because I felt like I'm so close and I don't want to, walk away from this just yet until I get to where I want to be. And once I climbed that mountain, I finished that journey with Thai boxing, I wasn't stimulated. So I felt like it's time to climb a different mountain, and boxing was the one. And I just remember something my younger brother said to me in the car, and my father was present, and he said, imagine what you could do in boxing, because Muslim, we have a Mir Khan for the male side of things in terms of inspiring Muslim, Asian, young youth. But we don't actually have that for the females. Imagine the kind of work you can do with that. And for me, that was enough to just get mind, like, yes, 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 this is what I'm about. This is what I want to do. This is what really I feel passionate about, is to inspire. It doesn't matter what the outcome is. For me, it's about inspiring people. That's where I get my joy from.
Yeah. Are you able to fund your current lifestyle through being a professional boxer, or do you have other part-time jobs or sponsorship?
This is something that actually, when I did the interview with The Guardian, he asked me the same thing. And I said, you know what? I actually don't know how I survived, because I just train full time. And for the last 3 years, I've just relied on sponsorship and things to just appear out of nowhere to help me. But there's no regular income. There's no, at the moment, I'm not sponsored. Last year, I was fortunate that Gymshark sponsored me. The year before, I was, fortunate again with Adidas, and I used that towards my training camps. Anything I get, I just put it towards my training camps. But yeah, no, it's really difficult as an athlete, because I don't have any set salary or income. I just rely on my savings to get through the dry patch, and then I hope that something amazing will come through just when I need it.
Oh, sounds stressful. Tell me a little bit more about your book. So it's called Born Fighter, and it came out recently. Where did the idea come from? How was it writing it? What was that experience like?
Yeah, so I initially thought of the idea in 2010 when I first became a British champion. And I've always wanted to write a book, and I felt like, okay, I've really taken a unique path here. And to be the first Muslim British champion and then to become a world champion, it was always something that I wanted to do. And quite often people say, well, you're not, Katie Price, you don't have a documentary, you're not popular enough. So, so I constantly got rejected. And then I never stopped believing in my vision. So I was persistent, and eventually I got in touch with Sarah Shepherd, who was my ghostwriter. And I said to her, I know you've written a book with, I think it was Lewis Smith, one of the Olympians. And I said, would you like to work with myself? She said, yeah, she would. So at that point, we just tried to push through, got ourselves an agent, and Simon Schuster then agreed. At first, I think initially they did say no, and then a different agent came on board and pitched my story and said, this is more of a human story. It's not just about boxing. This woman has overcome so many obstacles. This is something that most people will be able to identify in terms of overcoming depression, panic attacks, arranged marriage, identity, the inner conflict that I faced, the bullying that I went through in the gym. So there's so many layers to it. And then it got approved. And then here we are in 2020, my book finally comes out. But it was, again, another 10-year journey from the concept of it being in my mind to it finally materializing into a physical form. So yeah, I'm really proud of my book, and it talks about my experience in great detail and with honesty in all my parts, all aspects of my life.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure I put the links to the book. But Ruqsana,
Thank you.
How do you handle the negative people who maybe come across you in life, or the trolls, or the people who say, women shouldn't be fighting, Muslim women, as a Muslim woman, you shouldn't be fighting? How do you handle almost that criticism, if there is criticism?
Yeah. This is interesting, because I think when you know yourself and the people that you attract like-minded people in your life. So I've learned to eliminate people who don't share the kind of evolving thoughts that I may have or we may share. So yeah, if there's anyone that's negative or bringing my energy down, it's something that I think is just naturally we end up going our separate ways. It's not a debate, it's not an argument. I think life just takes us in different direction, which has been really interesting. And if there is someone who has those views, they're entitled to those views, because that's their views. And it's for me to be able to listen and have a broad mind and understand. I don't need to agree with it. And that's the difference. I don't need to react. I can just respond.
Yeah, absolutely. And ignore it, because I think it almost becomes from, you come from this position of power when you start to realize somebody's opinion of you, it does not, what am I trying to say?
Matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
It really doesn't matter. It's what you think of yourself.
Yeah.
And to be honest, we hear so many comments and criticisms throughout the day. Our mind learns to filter things that are important to us and what's not important to us already. But if you put energy into something, that means you care. So if someone says, "Oh, I don't believe in a woman fighting," that's up to them. I don't really take it too hard. I think, okay, you're allowed to that. I'm not going to go and try and challenge them in their own beliefs. I may try and influence them through the positivity that I've gained from my own experience and wisdom through the sport. But yeah, I think, people are allowed to have different perspectives, different, even from my book that, so many people have messaged me with, they've taken from one event, there's been like 10 different interpretations. And I think that's life. And we have to be able to adjust and accept that.
What are your dreams for the future?
My goal is to become a world champion in boxing. To be double world champion in two different disciplines would be amazing. But I think boxing for me is a vehicle, because I think I want something that is beyond that. I want to be able to inspire people through my journey, through my, as an example, as a role model. And, I hope I can do that and do people justice.
Absolutely. I have no doubt that it will happen. Ruqsana, I'd love for you to tell everybody where they can find more information out about you, follow along with your journey, follow you on social media. Where do you spend most of your time?
So you can follow me on Instagram. It's Ruqsana Begum -MT. I'm also on Twitter as Ruqsana Begum and Facebook. And you can direct message me or email me. And my book is available now on Amazon and also Waterstones. But, I hope you all enjoy it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you have any questions for me, feel free to just fire them out to me.
Fantastic. And Ruqsana, before we go, I'd love for you just to leave our listeners with final words of advice, final words of wisdom that you'd like to pass on for other women out there who are going through some challenging times. They just need that little encouragement to get to the other side, or to step into the ring and to face their opponent. What would you say?
Absolutely. One of my favorite mottos in life is, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you can pick yourself back up, because the challenges you face in life is ongoing. The moment you pick yourself back up from one, there's another one waiting right ahead. So it's being able to embrace it and being fascinated by it and finding that flow and that inner peace.
Ruqsana, thank you so much for coming on Tough Girl Podcast to share more about your journey and your life and all the challenges that you've faced and overcome. Absolutely inspiring. And I can't wait to follow along with your career in boxing.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Hey tribe, my name is Sarah Williams and I'm the host of the Tough Girl Podcast and the founder of Tough Girl Challenges, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. Everything that we've talked about today will be available in the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com. So I'm just going to give you 2 podcast episodes to take a listen to if you're particularly interested in boxing and fighting. So we first spoke with Stacey Copeland back on November 3rd, 2015, and Stacey is the most phenomenal boxer, and she comes from a boxing family, the Copeland family. Stacey's father was a professional boxer and her granddad has been involved in the family gym, and they've basically been teaching boxing for over 40 years. However, boxing was illegal for girls when Stacey was growing up, so she wasn't actually able to pursue her passion for it, so she ended up going into professional football instead. But after 12 broken bones, it was time for Stacey to retire from football, and at 29, when boxing boxing was now legal for women, she decided that she was going to follow her dream to see if she could make it in boxing. So it's an absolutely incredible story and well worth listening to. During this podcast episode, Stacey shares more about the hardships and challenges she's faced, how she's persevered, and how she was able to prove all of her doubters wrong. And she went on to win 2 ABA national titles, as well as 4 Box Cup tournaments in Europe. So an absolutely inspiring episode. And most recently, we spoke with Alicia Doyle, who's a journalist and the author of Fighting Chance. She's the winner of 2 Golden Gloves championship titles and was named the California Female Fight of the Year in 2000. So that episode came out on August 20th, 2020. So Alicia is an award-winning journalist, and she discovered boxing again at a later age, at the age of 28 in the late 90s, when she went on an assignment at a boxing gym for at-risk youth called Kid Gloves. For 2 years, she worked as a newspaper reporter while training and competing as a boxer. And she was one of the women who was one of the first women in the sport of boxing and infiltrated, a very male-dominated sport. So she shares more about her journey, her passion for boxing, what she's learnt along the way. So absolutely, again, a very, very inspiring episode. I've also done a little bit of boxing. So I did a white-collar boxing fight a couple of years ago, and actually did a solo episode talking about the training, what it was like stepping into the ring. So you can listen to that solo episode with me. Now, next week, we've got an awesome episode coming up. We're going to be speaking with Catherine Dixon and Rachel Marsden. So they're known by their nicknames Cat and Raz, and they are part of Tandem Wow. And they had a dream of cycling around the world on a tandem bike, which is what they did. So after 263 days, they arrived back in the UK at the end of March this year, just before lockdown came in, and they cycled over 18,000 kilometres, and they broke the previous men's record by more than 17 days. So during this podcast, they share more about their passion, what it was like being out on the road, what they learnt from each other, and share more about their focus and determination and how to make a dream become possible. So that's an absolutely fascinating episode, and that's going to be coming out next Thursday at 7 a.m. UK time. New episodes of the Tough Girl podcast are coming out on a Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. UK time, so make sure you do hit your subscribe button so you don't miss out. So the Tough Girl podcast is sponsorship and ad free, and that's thanks to the monthly financial support of patrons. If you want to find out more about supporting the work that I do to increase the amount of female role models in the media, then please do go and visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. You can support in euro, sterling, and US dollars. There is a monthly membership option, and there is also an annual membership option. Plus, you can also support via PayPal. So if you visit toughgirlchallenges.com, scroll to the bottom, there is a donate PayPal button. Every contribution really does make a massive amount of difference in helping to fund the running costs and allow me to produce this content on a regular basis. I hope you are enjoying it. I hope it's inspiring you. I hope it's motivating you. I hope it is encouraging you to step outside your comfort zone and try something new. I'll be back with you next week, but until then, take care. Lots of love. Bye.